Welcome back. Great you're joining us for the Solar4Ambitions session. I am very excited, I have to say. I could not imagine a better panel to discuss ambitions. 5 thought leaders who are joining me virtually in our Solar Power Summit studio here in our new Solar Power Europe office in the center of EU decision-making in Brussels. Becoming climate neutral by 2050 is a big task. Europe has to deliver together with international partners to avoid a climate collapse. China and the US set the tone recently, agreeing on working together to fighting climate change, which obviously the whole world is welcoming. But this also shows that it is an economic race as well. Is Europe ambitious enough? How can we live up to our ambitions? And what is needed to not only stop climate change, but also remain a global player when it comes to investments and when it comes to technology leadership? So I am really grateful to have you all here today. And I would like to discuss all these questions with you, with my distinguished panel. We have Vice President Frans Timmermans, Vice President of the European Commission, Leonore Gewessler, Austrian minister responsible for a whole big bouquet of portfolio, climate action, environment, energy, mobility, innovation, and technology. Xavier Viterra, CEO, Renewable Energy Business of Iberdrola. Salvatore Bernabei, CEO of Enel Green Power. And last but not least, and I would like to start with you, Kasia Moraes, founder and CEO of the Youth Climate Leaders. Kasia, young people like you are really driving the ambitions, not the least because you are reminding us, or at least you did before the COVID situation hit us on Fridays, that we really have to act and that climate change is threatening our societies and that we have to take it seriously. So what is your message to European decision makers? What is your message to Vice President Frans Timmermans? What is your message to Minister Gewessler?
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very honored to be here. I believe that children and youth worldwide are sending a message not only for us, but to the whole world. Greta started this movement, and when she was leading Fridays for Future, she was emphatic saying, why should we go to school if we will have no future? And with her simple act of defiance, she taught us a very important lesson and moved a lot the negotiations even in the topic. Most of us are still living our lives like the most pressing crisis humanity has ever seen is not happening, or as it will solve itself, but it won't. And given that the most aspects of climate change will persist over centuries and higher levels of temperature increase can also result in positive feedbacks that will leverage warming even more, it was about time for someone, no matter the age, to press the emergency button so that we could act as we were in an emergency, because we are. But yet, after over 25 years discussing what to do on annual UN climate conferences, change is still far from what is needed. And if all existing commitments from the Paris Agreement were to be achieved, we should still expect an increase in the Earth's average temperature of about 3 degrees Celsius. And this is 2 times above the threshold that scientists had averted us that could happen, a global catastrophe if we pass this limit, this boundary. We already have a planet almost 1 degree Celsius warmer than pre-industrial levels. Therefore, our carbon budget, the amount of greenhouse gas we can still emit, is low, and change should be fast and radical. This decade should be the decade that we moved towards a different direction. So every policy, not only in the European Union, but in the world, should be considering how we are going to make Europe and the world more resilient to the climate crisis. And I welcome the initiatives that the European Union is doing on this regard, and also pushing for a green recovery. The organization that I found, the Youth Climate Leaders, is meant to offer solutions to help young people tackle 2 of the main challenges that threaten their future in this century, which are the climate crisis and structural unemployment. Although young people make up the majority of the global population, they continue to encounter barriers to job opportunities and economic security, while dealing with an uncertain future due to the climate crisis. And the pandemic only exacerbated this scenario. Is this urgency that the fast-growing child and youth movement is pushing now for climate action? We are not asking politely anymore because it's too late for that. And while business as usual improvements were being discussed, we need to start a green revolution. And every day we are trying to build this new world that needs to emerge, this world that we think we deserve. And we build it when we choose a bicycle over a car, when a vegetarian meal instead of burger. We build it when we decided to dedicate our lives and careers to find a solution to a problem we were not the main responsibles for, but we still must resolve. And we will build this future we deserve together, a world that is more just and sustainable than the one in which we were born. And I think it's very important to bring also the Sustainable Development Goals and push for a climate transition that will also make the world better, that will also help to eradicate poverty and other problems from the past century that we still have. According to one of our main partners, every professional of the 21st century must know about climate change. So it's very important to add this in the curriculum of schools and professional development programs funded by European Union. In our case, we have more than 500 fellows from 20 countries, and we want to reach the mark of 1 million members by 2030, because we know that we need pretty much everyone working in this issue to overcome the challenge that we have. And our success is due to a growing increase in awareness about climate change in the last decade. But now that young people know about the problem, they want to do something about it. And this is what I want to stress. And even though I was sure I want to work in the field of climate change since undergrad, it took me a 6-year-long journey until I was finally able to land a job in the field. So it's important also to generate more entry-level jobs and combine this with professional development. But during those years when I was trying to get the job on climate change, I participated in many events that intended to give a voice to youth or raise our awareness, but none that would give concrete opportunities to take action afterwards. So that's why when I finally got there, I decided to found Youth Climate Leaders to help other young people that have the same dream of working or dedicating their whole lives to overcome the climate crisis. But I already talked about the climate crisis, so I want to finish with the other threat, the unemployment one, which is a pressing issue in all Europe as well. Today, a young person in the world is 3 times more likely to be unemployed than adults, even as collectively we are larger in numbers. And with the events of the COVID-19 pandemic, this disenfranchisement of young people increased, putting millions of risks to become marginalized or not being able to start their careers because they cannot find a job. And this is even worse for women. About 1/3 of all young women in the world are jobless or not in education or even training. And in Portugal, where I am based, youth unemployment rate is around 26%. So it's very high, and something must be done. Like about 1 in every 4 young people in the country are looking for a job after the pandemic. So that's why the good news, on the other hand, is that tackling the climate crisis may also be a unique opportunity to include those millions of young and older people in this new climate economy. So my message to the European Union is to ensure that young people are engaged in the transition to a carbon neutral continent. And we must go beyond giving a voice, but rather invest in professional development, education, and projects that will generate jobs for young people now and in the future. In another event I participated in the last week, it was mentioned that education and professional development are seen as decoration for many policymakers, but they are a crucial requirement if we want to implement all the ambitions the European Union already has and will have in the future. And moreover, to address climate change, we need youth innovations, ideas, passion, and courage to dream and build the future we want. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kasia. So we need a green revolution, we need to be fast, we need to be radical, and we need green jobs for our young generations. Vice President Timmermans, your first reactions to that before we then go more into details.
Well, I couldn't agree more. We would not have a European Green Deal if our young people didn't mobilize. over the years in the Fridays for Future movement and other movements. I had the experience when we had the election campaign for the European elections that only a few of us were campaigning for a Green Deal, very few of us. But the response of the public to this campaign convinced almost all politicians that it was time to act on the climate crisis. So I am eternally grateful to the younger generations for alerting us to this and for allowing us to actually come up with these policies. Without them, it wouldn't have worked. Secondly, you know, we've seen over the last year an outpour of solidarity by younger generations that really warms your heart. They've shown so much solidarity in this pandemic, not for themselves, because they don't really run that high risk, but they know that if they didn't, you know, restrain their own personal liberty, they would have infected others who would be much more vulnerable, other generations. So if we are at least conscious of that, we should now start showing our solidarity with their future. You know, if we don't act now, the pandemic we're in now will be seen as child's play. And there is no vaccine against the climate crisis. There is no vaccine against the risk of ecocide. So we really need to act now. And I think the biggest challenge is everybody is comfortable with saying we'll be climate neutral by 2050 or carbon neutral, some are saying, or 2060, because people think it's a long time away. But if we want to get there, we need to, in Europe, reduce our emissions with at least 55% in 9 years' time, which is a huge task. And we can only do that if we act now. And when I say now, I mean this year, these weeks, these months. That's why the Commission will come up with proposals before the summer on a number of areas, how to increase our transition to renewable energy. And this, of course, affects solar power a lot. How we increase the use of emissions trading systems. So we put a price on emissions more than we do now. How we increase the norms we have for cars and vans in terms of their emissions so that we get to clean transport, etc., etc., etc. And we should all share this incredible sense of urgency. We have literally no hour to waste. We need to act, and we need to act now.
Thanks very much, Vice President Timmermans. Minister Gewessler, I would very much love to have you also reacting to what Kasia just said, but I have some more detailed questions to you as well, because we need to take along all parts of the society and young people in particular. So my question to you is, Austria has very ambitious goals for 2030. So it's great to have member states like Austria driving also the discussions. How can we, or how can you also convince other member states to be as ambitious as Austria? And is it also realistic? We just fixed the goals for 2030. We're implementing it, and we are now revising these goals. Is it realistic? So that's my first question, to increase the targets. And my second one, because we have prominent representatives of industry here today, how can companies like Enel, like Iberdrola, also help member states like Austria increase the acceptance of the ambitious plans we have and the huge projects ahead?
Thanks a lot. Lots of questions in one, but I'd like to start with a thank you to Kasia. As I take you as a representative now for a whole generation, because as Frans Timmermans said, we need these constant calls and urges for action, for goals, but also for action. And so my biggest wish for anybody wanting to push the energy transition is to be active and to keep on pushing for ambitious policy. Because as Frans Timmermans said, the work is just starting. We now need to implement in every single policy, in every single directive, in every single thing we do and design. We need to make climate neutrality the guiding line. And so this is really hard work where we need the continuing support also from civil society, from all the movements pushing us to go further. Austria, as you mentioned, we've set ourselves ambitious targets also, climate neutrality by 2040 and 100% renewable electricity by 2030. which is, even though Austria starts from a relatively comfortable position of already 70% renewables in the electricity mix, it's a challenge. We need to increase our renewables capacity by 27 terawatt hours in the next 9 years until 2030, including 11 terawatt of solar. So as you can see, solar is also one of the backbones of this endeavor in the Austrian context. But you said, is it realistic? Yes, it is. It's quite obviously realistic. We have the tools, we have the technology, we need to do the right frameworks to make it happen. But I'm convinced that not just for Austria, for all of Europe, 100% renewable as a scenario, that's the winning strategy. I fully respect every member state on decision-making on their electricity mix. But if we look at the benefits that the energy transition gives us, it's local jobs in the transition, as Kasia was rightly so calling for. That's value creation locally instead of import dependency from other parts of the world. And it's climate action. That's our only viable path to climate neutrality. And so we really need to stay focused on that. But I think what's crucial in this, it's more than technological change. Yes, there's a lot of technological change ahead of us, but it's a social change. It means also change processes in our societies. And that's where I think we need to be really clear in also designing policy, that we put citizens, that we put the people in our countries also at the heart of this transition, to make it a decentralized, to make it a democratic transition. And so what are we trying to do there in Austria? I think two main pathways. The one is that we focus in our renewable support system to make it as easy as possible for individuals to put solar PV on their roofs. So target 1 million roofs by 2030. We want people to actually be not just consumers, but producers in this transition, to remove administrative barriers for them. So, for example, that grid access will be much easier. Every household will have the right to a grid connection, so that in the volume that they have in electricity connection. So without any other requirements, as easy and low key as possible. I think the second point, and that's why I focus so much on also a second pillar in this transition, is the energy communities. I think for people to come together, to produce energy, to produce electricity, consume it together, to really build the future in their communities, in their groups, in their families. That's, I think, a major building block for a social acceptance of this transition. And I think what's on all of us, and that's where I think industry comes in also very clearly, what's on all of us is to be very clear and also very positive, I think, is to put it as simply as that, in our communication. I think we need to be, we have changes ahead of us, but it's a change to the better. It's a change to a more resilient, to a climate-proof, to a renewable future with cleaner air, with better quality of life in our cities. And we need to be clear on the pathway, but we also need to be clear in the communication on the goal. And I think that's also where the industry comes in the communication towards citizens, along with all of us, but also in the communication within the sector, within the industrial sector, because we also the industry itself faces changes with this energy transition. So I think communication that takes all of the actors along will be key in that, and I think there we all have to play a part. Thanks.
Thanks very much. And if I could just comment on what you just said, the 1 million solar roofs in Austria, we would love to see that all over Europe. But you had a question or an ask to the companies, be more communicative, tell citizens what it is about, what our goals are. What are your ambitions? If I can start with you, Salvatore. when it comes to you as Enel Green Power, but also how are you taking up this challenge of communicating and acceptance as well in your work, and how can that be overcome?
Hi, Valburga, and thanks for your questions. Let's start with the ambitious. So I can summarize in 3 main ambitions. First of all, is about our growth in renewables. We defined some months ago and communicated to the markets in November our ambitions, speaking about ambitions, to grow to triple our installed capacity in renewables from the current 50 gigawatt to 150 gigawatt in 10 years. This is an incredible growth of 10 gigawatt per year, more or less. And this is just a part of the story, because in the meantime that we invest more in renewables, we are also decommissioning our coal plants. It is a journey that we started in 2017. We owned at that time 16 gigawatt of coal. We phased out 7 gigawatt, we are at 9, and we are envisaging to close definitely all the other plants by 2027. So 10 years frame to close all the coal. So we have to do both, right? To avoid to emit the new CO2, but also to install the new generation that should be renewable. And this growth also will be, especially in Europe, and especially in photovoltaic. In the next 3 years, we are planning to install 4 gigawatt of new capacity photovoltaic in Europe. And in Europe, I just would like to remind that there is also a huge potential, but also a huge ambitions, because the sum of the different national plan of the different countries sums up to 40 gigawatt per year in Europe of photovoltaic. So we have to do this new capacity. And in order to do that, there is also the second point, the second ambitions. As Enel, we identified that there is here a gap to fill. If we look to our industry in Europe, we are lacking a photovoltaic industry. We were champions some years ago, but then we missed this leadership. So my explicit request also to the Commissioner Timmermans and to the European Union is to think how to help the new birth of this industry in Europe. In my opinion, this segment of the industry should be classified as a strategic value chain. So then it could also have access to EPCI programs, for instance, or to receive a support by different optionalities. But in the meantime that we wait also a higher support from the European Union, we have started as Enel in investing in photovoltaic manufacturing, although it is not our business. We established a company called the Tree Sun in Sicily some years ago, and we are currently manufacturing 200 megawatt per year. So it's a very small manufacturing, but it has a very particular specificity. It owns the world record in cells efficiency if it refers to the bifacial heterojunction cells. So it was reached last year, 24.60 per 63 efficiency. This is just to say that in Europe, we own a leadership in terms of research and development. What we are missing is the scale. Our ambitions here is to grow from 200 megawatt per year to 3 gigawatt per year. 3 gigawatt per year. So we will reach the scale that will make us competitive also in terms of cost, because as per today, we are only competitive in terms of efficiency. If we are able to do that and we receive a higher support for the European Union, we could re-establish in Europe also the entire vertical integrated industry of photovoltaic. And by the way, as we are leader in research and development, we are also leading some new programs to work on circular economy also on panels. For instance, we are envisaging to use plastics instead of glass for the future panels. So reuse the plastic, recycled plastic to manufacture the panels. So just imagine what kind of a circular economy could we put into action. But we really need support from the European Union. There is Enel and 2 more companies who are planning to do gigafactory. We will sum up like 8 gigawatt per year of manufacturing capacity if we succeed. But we will succeed only if we will reach help. Because from the other hand, you cannot speak about renewables in Europe or green hydrogen in Europe if you are not able to do the plants and if you are not more independent also for the supply chain point of view. So obtaining this independence, I think, is strategic for Europe. The third main point is about the transition. This transition from fossil fuel to renewables should be just. What we are doing at Enel, we are very ambitious also because we are putting ourselves the objective to reskill at least half of our people, half of our suppliers that today are working in coal plants or were working the last years in coal plants. And with our people internally at Enel, we have already reskilled half of these people that are now today working in the renewables. When it comes to our suppliers, we are leading also here by doing the training for the installation of photovoltaics, for instance, or by carrying on other programs for the reskilling. For instance, we are inviting them to our business to participate to our tenders in the business of infrastructure network, because to do the renewables, we also need the grids. So we need also people qualified to build the new grids. But we are also inviting them to the e-mobility projects or to other projects. So reskilling the suppliers is key for the transition to be just. And I think this should be an objective that should be shared by all the actors that are working on this field.
Thanks very much, Salvatore.
But, last point about acceptance, just a few seconds. Acceptance, I mean, there are different kind of problems in doing this huge program. One is a local acceptance, but we as Enel follow with this creating shared value approach that help us to work better with the local communities. But it's true that we have to improve in terms of communication. I think that is missing a sense of urgency, a sense of action. We have to involve more the local communities, but here there is also a problem of acceptance from the administration that should then permit and authorize the project. In some cases, we need also strong communication there, a strong training there, because there is a view that's quite obsolete about the renewables, the role of the renewables in the system. So approving a new project or repowering also implies having a more modern administration, also in terms of mindset. So it also goes for a better communication.
Thanks a lot, Salvatore. Over to you, Xavier. So we heard from Enel Green Power. What are your ambitions? If you could sketch that in 3 short bullet points to hear a little bit what ePatrola is up to. And then also maybe your request to member states like Austria. What do you need in order to make these ambitions a reality?
Okay, thank you very much, Barbara. I think if you ask me for three points, starting for the first bullet, I think that what the European and the global ambitions are, I mean, fully shared by Iberdrola. And that means, I think that all of us thinks that Europe has to leverage his role as pioneer in decarbonization plans in order to reach all this carbon neutral society for 2050. I think it was mentioned by you, Bulga, and all the others that we have a lot of targets, and these targets are all more pushing for more ambitious goals. We know Austria looking for 100% electricity renewable system by the end of this decade. We know the last agreements of Europe. We also understand the last announcements even of the UK, US, of China. So I mean, we have here, let's say, the ingredients, okay? But now what we need to do is just do it. And in that sense, I will join very much to Vice President when we say, okay, that the climate is not going to wait for us and we have to act. And this is what Iberdrola is doing. Iberdrola is acting clearly, and this allowed me to bring or to jump into the second bullet. In that sense, I mean, I think that Iberdrola has been anticipating this energy transition for more than 20 years, right? So we started with this renewable business more than 20 years ago. Actually, I mean, we don't need to phase out any additional coal plants because we already did it in the past. And what we have done with this crisis has been to accelerate clearly our investment plans to become even, let's say, to be able to lead this transition to a clean energy future. In that sense, I mean, we are almost doubling of our investment on a yearly basis from now to 2025 and even higher for 2030. So we are going to more than triple, let's say, our gigawatts of stored capacity by the end of these decades. And finally, talking about ambitions, I think this is something that is very, very important. These are ambitions for the society, right? I think that all of us agree that we wanted to reach the goals that we have by 2050, we have to radically change our model in this decade. This is, I think, very important. And we have to take advantage that we understand there is a social consensus now, right now, that we have a big opportunity in this moment. Somehow, I mean, the decarbonization and the big plans that my colleague for Enel or Iberdrola are presenting in this case, I think that is going to create a lot of, let's say, new employments, what is new jobs, also what are, I mean, new industry, and somehow is going to change all the process, industrial processes, to something much more sustainable, even for the economy. Okay, so this means clearly that in the generation field we have been able to make these changes. Now we have to move clearly into what is the electrification of the transport, and also the heating and the air conditioners of the buildings. And if you allow me, just to finish with these ambition points, I mean, I'm going to use some words by our Iberdrola chairman that, I mean, he raised very few days ago, talking that when you see to all this investment and you see that we have such a need of such big amount of investment, there is room for everyone. Okay, this is something that changed somehow. I mean, now is the time of alliances, because what we have to do now is to change for you or me to you and me. That is the new, let us say, paradigm for the coming years. And this is with the ambitions. If I have just mentioned what I would be some way asking or talking to the minister or also to the vice president, I mean, it's clearly, I think that it's very clear that the European Commission and all the member states has been very, very, very supportive of the expansion of renewables, and understanding that actually renewables is one of the main motors of the European economic recovery within this European Green Deal. That's clear. And also has mentioned that these targets are achievable. I also believe on that. But probably what we need now is a little bit more support to adapt somehow the rules to this new reality. What I mean, for example, and it's clear that the speed of the industry in delivering the renewables, I mean, is going to be aligned with the speed of the permitting of the process, because the permitting is what is going to drive everything else: the construction, the production of the panels, and also all the supply chains. And if I want just to put a couple of comments on this permitting first, that actually this is the bottlenecks that the companies are finding for the expansion of the renewables. Second, I mean, because we find that there are different procedures and even different criteria not from one state to another, even from one, say, community to another, being one beside the other one. And also something that has happened is that very likely due to this pandemic, there is a lack of human administrative resources. Because I mean, I think that the administration is willing to do it, but probably has not the resources. And I think there's another way of producing jobs clearly to do it. And clearly, don't forget that renewables needs integration into the systems. So it means grid, intelligent grids, smart grids, digitalization, and also need storage systems. So efficient storage systems. Okay. And finally, something that I understand that all of us share it is that you wanted to enter into such a big, say, investment plans. I mean, what you need to have is a long-term visibility, a stable and predictable policies. So, I mean, somehow a robust framework. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Xavier. So a bundle of things you need from member states, from the European Commission, but you singled out permitting as one of the most important things where we need to move faster in order to deploy all the renewables. I would like to have a short round now on a topic which is very high on the agenda in Brussels, and I'm looking to Vice President Frans Timmermans, the missing link in our ambitions. Vice President Frans Timmermans, you have great ambitions with the European Clean Hydrogen Alliance, which should not only make Europe a leader when it comes to hydrogen, but also helping to decarbonize the economy, obviously. I would like to hear in two very short answers to two short questions from the industry. What is it? So is hydrogen really the missing link we need? And when we talk about renewable hydrogen, because that's a question we always get. Do we have enough renewables to power a renewable hydrogen economy? Could I just have two very short answers to these questions from Salvatore and from Xavier?
Okay.
Salvatore.
Thanks, Valburga. I mean, green hydrogen is a possible opportunity. It's a possible because there are some conditions that have to be complied, as you were mentioning, and there is an opportunity in case this condition precedent could be achieved. One of it clearly is the possibility to develop renewables, and it comes back one more with the problem of permitting. It has already been mentioned, I don't come back to it. But the other issue is that we have to achieve the decrease of cost of electrolyzers. And in order to do that, we have to mobilize a huge investment in experimenting new electrolyzer, new systems of stack, storage, etc. And as we have to do it now, as Mr. Timmermans was saying before, we have to decide now that we want to support this huge investment, this huge laboratory in the world of experimenting new kind of also behaviors, because we have to say this element should be put into the grid, integrated into the grid. So some regulation also is needed, because apart from producing hydrogen, we can also complement the revenues of these electrolyzers by supplying some ancillary services to the grid, for instance. So something should be done, but I mean, it's not the bottleneck about regulation also, but it should be done. The most important thing is to address the funds that we have, the energies that we have with this objective. Because if we start saying there are some other options in order to have hydrogen in the shorter time, blue one, for instance, or other types, we could go in the wrong direction. In what meaning? In the meaning that the blue hydrogen is not a ready technology for today. So we cannot manage the transition with the blue. Because having a blue project for the production of hydrogen means also developing a complex project, but also finding some site where to store the CO2. And apart from the fact that we will not solve radically the problem, we will just resolve partially the problem, then it will be extremely difficult, in my opinion, to do this project. So if we want to do that, because at the end it should be found a compromise, so at least let's introduce and check and balance systems. So if it's true that the blue should be a solution in the transition, so let's check every year what amount of investment are being catalyzed in the green and what in the blue. And let's redefine then the balance every year. Because in my opinion, what we have to do now is to strongly invest for this one big objective. Let's decrease the cost of electrolyzers. In order to do that, once more as an L, what are we doing? Apart from investing in doing experiments with some off-takers that need hydrogen, we will also launch an hydrogen laboratory in Sicily once more, attracting different startups for Europe, where they could experiment different prototypes of the electrolyzers integrated with a plant, a renewable plant already existing, so that they could shorten this learning curve, and we could contribute to this objective of making the electrolyzer cheaper as soon as possible.
Thanks, Salvatore. Xavier, can we base our plans on renewable hydrogen? Is that realistic?
I will say that, I mean, that I cannot agree more with the European energy system integration strategy when they stated that direct electrification based on renewable energy is the main pillar for the decarbonization. So I think that nowadays, if we look to Europe with the existing technologies of wind, solar, electric vehicles, and even electric heat pumps, I mean, we can achieve maybe from 60 to 87 to 85% of the final energy demand. It's important. Nevertheless, we have to recognize somehow that there is some hard to electrify or hard to abate needs of the industry where we need to use the hydrogen. I fully agree with Salvatore when we mean that this has to take us or to drive us to the renewable hydrogen, okay, produced with 100% of renewable electricity. And obviously, this means somehow that this is going to have a key, let's say, in the role of the decarbonization of these sectors. So somehow, to your question, is true that the renewable hydrogen is the missing link that the direct electrification requires to reach these agreements. Especially, I mean, we're talking about the solar in this case. I think solar has great features to go along with the renewable hydrogen. I mean, I think it's very clear. So in that sense, I mean, this is something that Iberdrola is doing. Iberdrola that actually was not only to reduce the emissions of the generation, but also wants to help our customers to reduce the emission. What we are doing is we have created, say, just a division to do this, to produce this hydrogen related to, let's say, some solar plants, and very much also, say, related to the place where the consumption is required. So I think the industry, if we are able to give the opportunity, is able to deliver all the renewables required for the direct and also the renewables required for these renewable hydrogen requirements or necessities.
Thank you very much, Xavier. I wanted to have a very short round, but obviously hydrogen, you cannot debate it shortly. Frans Timmermans, the hydrogen strategy is very much your strategy. Any reactions to what you just heard? And then I would also like to hear from Mr. Gewessler, because you're working on a hydrogen strategy, what your reactions are to that. Vice President
Well, first of all, we're on an extremely steep learning. When I started with the ideas on the hydrogen strategy here internally in the Commission, nobody wanted to do it. I forced also the administration to work on this because I see huge merit. And now we're a year and a half later, and hydrogen is a bit hyped even around Europe. But it will play a crucial role in our energy mix. I have no doubt about that. The one thing I wanted to say, because it's so important for this hydrogen issue, if you look at over the years at the International Energy Agency reports, constantly the price of renewables is overestimated. The price reduction of renewables is exponential and will probably continue to be exponential. So business models are changing as we speak. I believe that if especially solar, but also offshore wind, where Europe has a huge advantage over the rest of the world, don't underestimate that. If that continues in the price as you could imagine, and especially Enel and Iberdrola know this very well, then of course electrolyzers become much more interesting, and producing hydrogen becomes a lot more affordable because of the abundance, hopefully, of renewable energy, especially from solar and also wind. And then the difficult to abate sectors will be more profitable, much more quickly. The weaning ourselves of fossil fuel can be speeded up. Now, very briefly, where do I see the problems? The problems I see in what was said before, permitting. And that's our job. At all levels of government, we need to make sure permitting is speeded up so that the introduction can happen much quicker. Secondly, we're going to have a huge shortage of labor in many sectors. And this goes back to what Kasia was saying before. The problem is, given Europe's demographics, we should have full employment if we are smart. We should have full employment if we give our young people the skills they need to work in a hydrogen economy, to work in a circular economy, to work in the renewable energy sector. And I think this is the permitting is a bottleneck, skilled labor is a bottleneck. I give you another example. In the batteries, European battery sector, which is going to be one of our success sectors, I promise you, we will need 800,000 people to work in that sector. But these people need to have the skills to work there. So at some point, there's going to be a competition between sectors to get people in, rather than the risk of huge unemployment. The risk of unemployment is linked with a lack of skills and nothing else. And that means that in all of this, whatever the companies are doing, and I applaud what they're doing, public authorities have a huge responsibility to create an enabling environment. If we create the right enabling environment at European level, national level, but also at regional and local level, then this development will speed up enormously, given the price development of renewables.
Thank you very much, Mr. Timmermans. Ms. Gewessler.
I can basically echo the 4 points that Frans Timmermans just made, but give them a bit of an Austrian perspective, maybe. So on hydrogen, you asked whether hydrogen was a missing link. And I think if that's the question, we should be very careful to debate hydrogen in a way that we put it as hydrogen is a purpose in itself. So we need to really focus on the system and the system transformation that that we need. And there it does play a key role, but we need to focus it on where we need it most, coming back to the hard to abate sectors, coming back to industrial processes. And we need to make sure that the missing link doesn't get us into a dead end. Dead end meaning that we need to focus on green hydrogen and be very clear that the future is a renewable future also for the hydrogen industry. So we are working in Austria also on a hydrogen strategy currently in the final stages, which goes along these two lines, that we give guidance and focus on the one hand side, and that we are very clear our way is 100% renewable. The aim is to install 1 to 2 gigawatt electrolysis capacity until 2030, which means a minimum of 200 megawatt until 2025. And so we're working on the enabling framework also in this. But as many of you mentioned, permitting and the way we do our, on the different levels of governance, we work on this transformation of the energy system. That's a key part of the job. That's very, very clear that also administration has a task to do there. And that's also why we said once our Renewables Deployment Act is on the way, that's actually when our work starts just anew, to work with our federal states in mobilizing the space we need to make sure we have the administrative rules, that we have availability on the roofs, that we have availability for solar PV also on grassland, that we are clear in the permitting, that we speed up, that we see what we need to do there. So work only starts once the law is there, which I think is a crucial point to keep in mind. The third point, labor. Yes, energy transition is a huge chance. The renewables deployment law that we are planning, so 2030, 100% renewable electricity, means investments of 30 billion euro and 100,000 jobs a year secured and newly created. And so to work together with other departments, with our Minister of Labor, to be sure we have the skills, the programs in place to reskill, as was described also from inside the industry, but also with the public support needed, to be sure we tap in the potential, the female potential we have, as Kasia rightly so mentioned. Yeah, I think there is a lot of work to do there, but it only underlines why the energy transition is right now the right answer in especially this situation that we're in now, because it creates jobs, it creates local value, and it gives not just our generation, but future generations a good place to live in Europe. And the fourth point, the enabling framework, I think that, of course, is a multitude of layers we have there, but I wanted to go back to something that was mentioned before. I think the question, especially for the PV industry, for the solar industry, of I'd even call it reshoring parts of the industry to Europe in the production, in the whole vertical integration, is a key task that we have, where I think the discussion has also moved quite rapidly within the last year, as we've seen how crisis can really make us vulnerable also in our supply chains, in our capacity to act. So I think there we have work to do also at the European level. For example, the suggestion to expand IPCEIs also in the energy sector is a very good one, I think. But many other issues playing there. So I'm very much looking forward to the Fit for 55 package. Lots of work to get that then on the ground and going. But also issues like the decarbonization guidelines, knowing it's not part of the Fit for 55 package. But I think there's a lot of legislative work also that we need to do to really push forward, to really speed up and accelerate the transition, because yeah, the time to act is now. So there's a lot of things we need to do at the same time. But yeah, it's a great job to be at the driving seat of this transition now. It's a historical moment in time, actually.
Indeed, I couldn't agree more. And both your comments have almost been closing statements. Time is flying, unfortunately, and we're coming to the end. I would like to ask you, Kasia, whether you, because we started out with jobs, with green jobs for the younger generations, are you more confident after this discussion? Maybe just some reactions from you, and then I would like to wrap up.
Thank you. Yes, and I think the European Union has all the potential to drive and be an example on all the topics that we mentioned. And the potential is there also to transform climate change from a hideous threat, not only to young people, but all of us, to a unique opportunity to include these millions of people in the emerging climate economy. According to research of the C40, investments in residential energy efficiency can generate 5.4 million jobs, like in the next few years. District-scale renewable energy for heating and cooling in buildings can generate approximately 8.3 million jobs, and which is also a few examples in the global scale. And as was already said here, solar energy brings additional benefits, such as generating local jobs, and it can also be an alternative for reskilling projects, as it generates many jobs that would not require super advanced tech skills. In fact, there are projects worldwide that could inspire the European Union on this regard. For example, Solar Mamas, they train rural illiterate women in India to become solar energy engineers. So this also has benefits for women empowerment. Oftentimes they are fleeing from abusive relationships, and they can now generate income and be owners of their lives, and they did not even have to learn how to write to do that. So that's a powerful way to include. And in the case of European Union, we will have this issue a lot with immigrants. So perhaps like with immigrants, that can be a potential to include in the economy in a way that they will not be marginalized and generate other problems, social problems that we are facing right now. Another example that we have on our network is Renewables Solar, and they are generating, they are creating jobs in Brazilian favelas with solar panels, installing solar panels there. And in that way, they combine local jobs, reliable energy, and create alternatives, mostly for young people, to overcome poverty and violence, which is also an example of how this can be employed worldwide. And the European Union, everything that we do here will also echo in other continents, and through also collaboration with other countries. The second point is important to stress that we should focus not only on creating jobs, but better jobs. And again, the energy and the overall climate transitions can also deliver that. For example, it's better to work with solar panels than with coal. It's better to work using agroforestry than with old livestock in Brazil right now. So these are examples on how we are talking about making a better life, and young people are looking for that. We don't want just to pay our bills. We want to be happy. We want to combine it with our lives. In YCL, we are creating now a project that is called Climate Moms. So we are showing how the renewable energy and climate change can be an opportunity for women that became recently moms, and they want to combine with their personal lives. Mr. Salvatore brought a very important issue too, which is the importance of reskilling in this transition. And the private sector has a role to play, a very important one on this challenge, but we need policies in the European level. We need to have, in the case of YCL, we are trying to pilot what we call boot camps to combine local, regional, and national plans to understand what are the opportunities that will be generated and what are the skill gaps, the profession gaps, so that we can bridge those gaps and advance and reskill in larger scale, because I believe that if you do this in this decade, we will see the real change happening. And this is a positive ripple effect. And talking about European policies, we could add requirements for European grants to hire young people, because I've been already consultant for European Union in several projects, and we see that oftentimes people have at least 5 years of experience. So we could have a percentage of HR that should be deployed for young people, so they could hire entry-level consultants, and even train these people so that we also would generate more jobs for young people. And perhaps like when we talk of more complex economic policies, such as the universal basic income, we could combine reskilling and universal basic income in a way that if you know that someone has no jobs and want to enter this climate economy, to pay a small fee so that this person can pay their bills while they are being trained, and then they will be deployed on a climate job. Because we need like to link the dots. Like, so if someone doesn't have a job now but doesn't have the skills, we have the means to provide both for them to pay their needs, but also like to be trained and deployed in this new economy. So I believe if we have the right agreements and policies in place, we'll have a very successful decade.
Thanks very much, Kasia, for your additional insights and recommendations. Time is up, unfortunately. So I would like to thank you all, but maybe Frans Timmermans, Vice President Frans Timmermans, if you could give us some closing remarks. What are your main takeaways?
Well, I think the main line is we have no time to waste, and we need to get going right now. And what is also clear is we all have our specific responsibility in this transition. It will succeed if it is just. It will succeed if everybody does their part, whether it's young people in the movements that push us there, whether it's us at all levels of government, European, national, subnational, and especially also in the private sector, not just the energy sector, but all sectors. We're in this together, and we can only succeed if we all do our part at least 100%.
Thank you very much for this great debate. I hope you at home at your screens enjoyed it as well. You are now invited to relax and join another wellness break we are offering. And then afterwards, fully relaxed, please join us again at 4:45 for our Solar Gender Champion Awards, our first Solar Gender Champion Awards. We will bring to you the 3 finalists, great companies who are improving their business in different ways by introducing more diversity. You will have the opportunity to learn more about these companies and vote for your favorite. So I hope to see you back after the break. Enjoy.